Hey everyone, it's Tobes, and welcome to your second monitor. Today is the next video in my series of March of the Machine Commander deck techs. I'm covering every legendary creature from the March of the Machine main set in no particular order, plus the extra legends from Mom Jumpstart, the special pre-release promos, and if there's interest, maybe the non-face legends from the Mom Commander products. So if you have a request for a commander you'd like to see me build, or a way you want to see me build them, let me know in the comments below. As you see, today our commander is Hidetsugu and Kairi, the wise spirit dragon and brutal ogre demon from Kamigawa. When the Phyrexians invaded, Kairi was forced to pull out all the stops to defend Kamigawa, and that meant freeing Hidetsugu from his prison in the spirit realm. This was a calculated part on Kairi's part, as Hidetsugu was the one who slew Kairi's former incarnation, Kaiga. Kaiga? I think it's Kaiga. Anyway, Kairi's plan was to recapture Hidetsugu as soon as he was no longer necessary to drive off the invaders and to lock him away. Honestly, relatable. I think we've all had a coworker we feel that way about. So before we get into the deck tech, let's go over my deck building template. I like to build my decks around my commander. I want to show off why they're a cool card and so why I put them in the command zone. So whatever they want me to do, I put 30 cards toward that. That's my game plan. It's what I do at the table and how I try to win. 30 more cards go toward supporting that game plan in the form of these three categories of support: card advantage, acceleration, and interaction. I usually run one or two Wraths, sometimes more, if it would play into my game plan, sometimes none at all, but I almost always stick to my floor of 38 lands, so I can make my land drops and cast my spells. So let's talk about our team-up commander. Hidetsugu and Kairi is a 5/4 legendary ogre demon dragon for 2 double blue and a single black. They have flying. I'm going to call them H and K for most of the video. They have flying and 2 other triggers. When they enter, we draw 3 cards, and then we put 2 cards from our hand on top of our library in any order. Does not have to be 2 of the 3 cards that we drew. And when they die, we exile the top card of our library. One of our opponents will lose life equal to its mana value, and if it was an instant or sorcery, we can cast it without paying its mana cost. So if we look at H and K's enters trigger, we can see that it's just Brainstorm. I know, beautiful art, one of my favorite arts for Brainstorm. So this is a powerful effect that doesn't just give us card selection, it also lets us move cards from our hand back onto our library to set up for future turns. This can be frustrating if, for example, we need lands and we know none are coming. But that's the drawback of such a strong spell, and one more reason why fetch lands are great. It's also been the subject of debate as to the, quote, best way to brainstorm. See the video's description for a very serious example. But with our commander, this sets us up for our death trigger. We know that we're going to have a specific card on top of our library because we put it there, so choosing to stack an expensive spell on top means we get to dome our opponent for a big chunk of damage. Even better, if we choose to put an instant or sorcery there, we get to cast it for free. If only there were a way to get both of our commander's triggered abilities at the same time. That's right, we're a clones deck. Technically, we're a copies deck. Rather than using creature spells that can enter as duplicates of our commander, we want to make token copies of H and K using instants and sorceries, since we can cast those with our commander's death trigger. But how do we make sure they die? For that, we need to talk about the legend rule. That's right. We're talking about state-based actions. So whenever anyone gets a chance to do something in Magic, that is, when they would receive priority, the game performs what are called state-based actions. This is what makes the game's engine run, a checklist that ensures creatures die when damage is marked on them, tokens disappear once they've left the battlefield, and players win or lose the game. One of these is called the legend rule. It says, if 2 or more legendary permanents with the same name are controlled by the same player, that player chooses one of them, and the rest are put into their owner's graveyards. This is the legend rule. What this means is that if we make a copy of H and K, and if that copy is also legendary, which it would be unless the spell says otherwise, one of them dies. This isn't a sacrifice, it just happens. And because it's a state-based action, it doesn't use the stack, meaning the triggers for both the copy entering and dying go on the stack at the same time. And since we control both triggers, we get to put them on the stack in whichever order we like. So, we choose to resolve the enters trigger first. We brainstorm, and we put an instant or sorcery on top of our library. Then the death trigger resolves, and we reveal that card we just put there. An opponent of our choice loses life, and we get to cast the spell for free. And if that spell is another copy effect, we get to repeat the process right away. And what if we have a Blood Artist in play to ping our opponents every time we do this? What if we're running spells that care about us drawing cards, since we draw 3 every time any version of H&K enters? And what if we fill our deck with huge non-permanent spells, the kind we'd likely never get a chance to ramp our way into in a normal Commander game, to give us massive effects and drain our opponents for 6, 7, 8, 9 life each time? What if we did all of that? That's our deck. We're here to pump out copies of our Commander and ride the wave of trigger after trigger, depleting our opponents' life totals at the same time we drain away their hopes of winning. We cast big free spells again and again, drawing endless cards, stacking them on top, and drawing them again, chaining our way into massive turns that leave our hand full and our board scary. We don't play slowly, but our turns end up feeling like we're in the front of the queue at the office copy machine, and it's just not working right. Every copy we make, we immediately crumple and throw into the bin before we hit the print button once more. Everyone is waiting in line behind us, and they can feel their hearts sink with each new copy. And all they can do is dread the moment when we turn around and tell them, sorry, you're not getting anything done today. Copier's on the Fritz. You'll enjoy this deck if you love fast combos that involve making meaningful choices, or if you like huge, splashy effects and seeing them burst your opponent's bubbles and their life totals simultaneously. So as usual, this Moxfield list that I'm going to go through today is in the video's description. At the bottom of the Moxfield list, below the deck, you'll see a considering section. It's got a bunch of cards that I decided not to put into the deck, but I did consider. So if you have a different budget, either a bigger one or a smaller one than I went for this deck, or if you want to focus on specific things that this deck does at the levels I've chosen, but you want to focus on them a little bit more, like actual clone spells, you'll find a lot of good options to start with in that considering section. So I do want to mention first of all that I have a tag Castables. We've got 31 cards in the deck that are castable by H&K's last ability. That means these are instants and sorceries. As you can see, sorceries, instants, they add up to 31. That's important because we want to make sure we have a critical mass of things that we can put on top of our library and then cast again, whether or not they're clone spells. So important to do that, but we're going to see all of these castables in different categories, so we're going to look at those categories first. The most important of which is our copies section. So about 2/9 of our deck is copy spells, spells that can make a copy of our commander. Because that's what we want to do. We want to ramp into our commander and immediately, or the next turn, start making copies and getting the game rolling. So we're going to start with 3 steps ahead. 3 steps ahead looks like it costs a single blue for an instant, but it has spree, which means we have to choose one of these additional costs, and we'll get the effect that is related to that cost. But we can choose 2 of these 3, or even all 3 if we're willing to pay the entire total cost. So if we want, this can simply be cancel. It'll be a blue, and then 1 and 1 more blue, so a total of 1 and double blue for counter target spell. Just a good way to protect ourselves or remove something that is going to be threatening if it resolves. What we are here for is a blue and 3, create a token that's a copy of target artifact or creature you control. We could hit an artifact with this, maybe having a second soul ring would be good, but we're probably going to hit H&K with it. Or we can pay the blue and 2 and draw 2 cards and then discard a card, just have a nice catalog effect. Or we can, if we have the mana for it, do multiple ones of these. It is worth mentioning that if we spin into this with H&K, we don't get to cast this for free off of H&K's death trigger, except for the initial blue, because these are all additional costs. Additional costs are not mana costs. This is the mana cost, just the single blue. So if we were to get this off of H&K, our opponents are only going to lose a single life, or opponent that we target, and we're only going to have to not pay this single blue. We will have to pay any additional costs if we want to get effects from them. And we're going to have to because we can't even cast this unless we're willing to pay additional costs. It's not like Kicker where it's optional. So that's 3 steps ahead. Next is Cackling Counterpart. 1 and double blue for an instant that gives us a token that's a copy of target creature we control. Really nice to note. 3 steps ahead is an instant because it can be a counterspell, but an awful lot of these are sorceries versus instants. So having an instant speed copy spell is pretty sweet. And 3 mana. In addition, we can flash it back from our graveyard for 5 and double blue. We're never going to be able to drain our opponents for 7 with this spell. It'll always drain them for 3 if it's on top when our death trigger resolves. But still, a nice way to, maybe we don't have any good copy spells in our hand. We just don't have a way to get to them. But Cackling Counterpart's in our graveyard, and we've got 7 mana, which isn't hard to get to in this deck. We can get things started with that. Next is Quasi-Duplicate, another great way to do copies from our graveyard. Quasi-Duplicate is 2 and double blue for a sorcery that makes a token of a copy of target creature, a token copy of target creature we control, and it has Jumpstart. Not to be confused with the Jumpstart product, which does not have a hyphen. Jumpstart means we can cast this from our graveyard if we discard a card in addition to paying its casting cost, and then when we do, we exile Quasi-Duplicate. So Quasi-Duplicate, we can cast it a second time by throwing away a land or something we don't need, or even we could throw away Cackling Counterpart because we know that we can flash it back later. It's a nice way to get multiple copies from the same card. Next is Saw in Half from Unfinity. Love this card. Saw in Half is 2 and a black for an instant that says destroy target creature. If that creature dies this way, its controller creates 2 tokens that are copies of that creature, except their power is half that creature's power, and their toughness is half that creature's toughness, round up each time. What this means is we can kill an opponent's creature, and they'll get 2 copies that are basically half the size of it. It's removal, for sure, but what we want it for in this deck is to shoot Hidetsugu and Kairi with it. If we do that, we're going to make 2 copies of H&K, both of which will enter at the same time, and they'll be 2/2s. Which means we're gonna have to legend rule one of them away. And we can take the original H&K and put it in our command zone to be cast again. Or we have a couple of different ways to bring creatures back from our graveyard. Maybe we just want to put H&K, the original, into the graveyard, knowing we can get them back later. And if someone happens to exile our graveyard before we can do that, or eat that card out of it, we can just move it to the command zone then. No big deal. Saw in Half is a great way to get double triggers for our enters and double triggers for our death triggers on top of the death trigger that we get just from H&K itself. What's nice is all of this will resolve at once. So when it happens, we're going to get the death trigger for H&K, as well as the 2 enters triggers for the tokens, and the death trigger of one of those tokens. None of those triggers from the original or from the tokens that come in or the token that dies go on the stack before this is all done resolving. So we're going to get 2 enters triggers and 2 death triggers, and we can stack them the way we want to. Usually the way we're going to want to do that is enters death, because it lets us set up for the death trigger and cast something good that may be able to chain us into something else. And even if it doesn't, we've got a second enters and death trigger after that. But it's fine if you want to do 2 enters triggers in a row. It just means you're sort of reliant on whatever you get on top of your library and making sure you can keep going with it as you've stacked them from the second enters trigger, the second brainstorm. So yeah, it becomes pretty clear how this works once you start playing it, once you start playing out brainstorms, if you're not familiar or used to playing brainstorm. So if you're not, I recommend when you have a situation like this that you stack it so that it enters and then dies and then enters and dies. You brainstorm and then you exile the top card, then you brainstorm and exile the top card. And once you've gotten accustomed to it, you'll be able to see different ways of stacking that will be to your advantage. Next up is Mirror Hall Mimic. This is the only permanent card in this section. The reason it's important is because this is an actual clone. There are a bunch of clones in the considering section of this deck, but this is the only one in the deck itself, and there's a reason for it. For 3 and a blue, we get a spirit that is a 0/0, but we may have it enter as a copy of any creature on the battlefield, except it's a spirit in addition to its other types. So what we do is we have this enter as a copy of H and K. The legend rule will happen. We'll immediately sacrifice one of them, and we could sacrifice the original, but we should sacrifice Mirror Hall Mimic. We'll get the enters and death triggers for Mirror Hall Mimic coming in as a copy of H and K, and Mirror Hall Mimic will go to the graveyard. While it's in the graveyard, it has Disturb. I mean, it has Disturb all the time, but Disturb is relevant while it's in the graveyard. So for 3 and double blue, we can cast it transformed as Ghastly Mimicry, which is an aura that enchants a creature. Hopefully, we can cast this the same turn. And I know that's 9 mana in a turn, but it would be great if we can, because what it does is it enchants a creature. We will enchant our commander with it. And it says at the beginning of your upkeep, create a token that's a copy of enchanted creature, except it's a spirit in addition to its other types. So we'll get a token copy, not just the clone, but the copy of our commander during our upkeep, and get to do the whole legend rule it, brainstorm, get the death trigger as well. And then we'll just draw our card for the turn and move into to the rest of our turn, which is great because we will have brainstormed during our upkeep. We will have exiled the top card of our library, but we know what's after it because brainstorm puts two cards on top of our library. So we also know what we're drawing. The only other note is that if Ghastly Mimicry would be put into a graveyard from anywhere, we exile it instead. So if we were to lose the original H and K while Ghastly Mimicry is enchanting it, we lose Ghastly Mimicry forever. But that's all right. We've at least gotten one instance of this use out of Mirror Hall Mimic. Or if there was a way that we just put Mirror Hall Mimic into the graveyard, well, we can just disturb it from there and just get the Ghastly Mimicry. Next is Phantom Steed. Oh, I'm sorry. There is one other instance of a permanent that does this. This is an interesting way of doing things. I think this card is really cool from the Forgotten Realms Commander product, but it sort of protects our commander in a way, but it does change the way that the deck plays out. So here's the way this works. Phantom Steed is a 4/3 horse illusion for 3 and a blue with flash, and when it enters, we exile another target creature we control until Phantom Steed leaves the battlefield. So we're Oblivion Ringing it. Why this is helpful is we could, once it's exiled, put it back in the command zone, but the idea is to leave it exiled under Phantom Steed, and then whenever Phantom Steed attacks, we make a tapped and attacking token that's a copy of the exiled card, except it's an illusion in addition to its other types, and we sacrifice that token at the end of combat. So the idea here is we attack with our 4/3 horse, and we get a free Hidetsugu and Kairi. It will come in tapped and attacking. It is a 5/4 flyer, which is a pretty good attacker. And when it comes in, it'll brainstorm. That's its enters trigger. And either it will die in combat, or we'll sacrifice it at the end of combat, assuming someone doesn't, bounce it or exile it or something like that. In any case, it's likely to die either from combat damage or from its sacrifice trigger, and then we will get its death trigger. So it's not happening at the same time, but it is in the order that the two triggers are in the order that we want them to be. The brainstorm to set ourselves up for the death trigger, and then the death trigger itself. And we get to do that once every turn when we attack with the Phantom Steed. And if our Phantom Steed dies, no big deal, because our original Hidetsugu and Kairi will come back, and we get the brainstorm again. So a pretty fun way to see the deck play it differently. I always like to have a couple of cards in the deck that play to the game plan, but in a slightly different way than sort of the engine of the game plan. So you get to have a little textural difference every time you play it. Pretty fun. And in any case, it's a 4/3 for 4 that you can flash in. That's a great way to protect our commander, because we flash it in when someone's trying to kill it. If we don't want that death trigger, we can go ahead, or if they're trying to exile it or bounce it or something, we can just protect it with our horse. And now they've got to use a different removal spell to get rid of the horse so they can get back at our commander. Next, we have Rite of Replication, a classic. 2 and double blue for a sorcery with kicker 5 generic mana. So if we're willing to pay 9 for this, pretty good. It says create a token that's a copy of target creature, and if this spell was kicked, create 5 of those tokens instead. Can you imagine getting 5 H&K copies, having them all go away, and stacking it so you get to brainstorm and then reveal the top card, drain an opponent, and cast a spell. Do that 5 times in a row. And among those, just chain your way into more copies. Being able to cast these huge spells that you're going to see soon, how big some of these spells are, and just drain our opponents over and over. Kicking Rite of Replication might be the end of the game for more than one player. It's just very powerful and seems like a lot of fun. Now, we do get to pay Kicker, I believe, when we cast it for its mana cost, without paying its mana cost, as we cast it. So if we were to use H&K's Death Trigger to cast this off the top of our library, we're not paying its mana cost, but we are allowed to pay the Kicker cost. So we get to just pay 5 for it. That's pretty sweet. C Double, also from March of the Machine, just like our commander, is really fun. 2 and double blue for an instant. It's an instant, but it can itself be copied, which we're not really trying to copy our spells anyway, just our commander. It says choose one, and if an opponent has 8 or more cards in their graveyard, we may choose both instead. That's not hard to get to in Commander. C Double can copy a spell, and we can choose new targets for the copy, and a copy of a permanent spell becomes a token. So we aren't typically going to be using this as much as the second mode, which is create a token that's a copy of target creature. We want to just hit our commander with that. But it is possible that we might have our opponent, I don't know, target us with a Doom Blade, or have an opponent play something crazy like a Rite of Replication that's kicked. We can choose to respond to that with C Double, copying their spell, getting to choose a new targets for the copy. So maybe we Doomblade one of their things as well, and maybe we Rite of Replication our own commander as well. In addition, we make a token that's a copy. So we get to have a free extra H&K as well as a free spell if we've got both. But even if it's just protecting us from some kind of kill spell or something along those lines, we can end up with an awful lot of value stealing their spell. And if they're trying to board wipe us, getting a extra copy of H&K, even if it's going to die from the legend rule or otherwise, that still gets us the ability to drain our opponents using its death trigger, or death triggers perhaps, if it's not like an exile board wipe, and to give us more chances for card draw with the Brainstorm ability. Next is Tempt with Reflections. What a fun card from the Tempting Offer cycle. For 3 and a blue, we have a sorcery with Tempting Offer, which says choose target creature we control. We create a token that's a copy of that creature, already good for 4 mana. And then each opponent may create a token that's a copy of that creature, and for each opponent who does, create a token that's a copy of that creature. So we can give everyone a chance to have their own H&K moment. But it won't be the same as ours because they're only going to get 1 copy of it. They will get a 5/4 flyer and a free Brainstorm. That's a lot of value, but it's not as much value as we're getting if they do that. Because already, even if no one chooses to do this, we're getting to do the Brainstorm, the enters and then death trigger from our copy of H&K. And if anyone else wants that, they get a 5/4 flyer and a free Brainstorm, but we get a Brainstorm and a death trigger for everyone who does that. It's so much more value for us, and even without that, it's a pretty good amount of value, just because our commander is so good and because the legend rule makes it even better, just making a single copy of it. Tempt with Reflections is really cool in this deck, especially if this is the card you reveal off of the death trigger from having made a copy some other way. Everyone else says, oh, maybe I'll do that too. And suddenly you've got 4 copies of this coming into play and all these different triggers on the stack. It's just a lot of fun. Vesuvan Duplimancy, I guess, is another permanent. I was thinking more of creatures when I was saying that earlier, but this is a really fun spell. And it's just fun in this deck, especially when we get to target our commander with our copy effects. So Vesuvan Duplimancy is 3 and a blue for an enchantment that says whenever we cast a spell that targets only a single artifact or creature we control, we make a token that's a copy of that artifact or creature, except it's not legendary. So this is one of the few ways that we can do this in our deck. I think it may be the only one left. This means we would get another H&K, but a non-legendary version. So it will give us the enters trigger, but we do not have to get rid of one of the two thanks to the legend rule, because we now have an H&K that isn't legendary. This is, again, a little bit different sort of lane we can get into with this deck. Having two 5/4 flyers is pretty great, especially since both of them have the threat that if they die, we're going to be able to cast something off the top of our library, or even if we don't get to cast it, we can at least drain some with it in all likelihood. So being able to do this and have ourselves a non-legendary version of our commander is pretty strong, especially since we can then target the non-legendary token with our clones, our copy spells, and when we do, we're going to be able to make copies of those, not simply because we are casting a spell that makes copies, but because Vesuvan Duplimancy sees us targeting a single creature we control. So having an army of Hidetsugu and Kairis is a pretty fun way to win the game too. Like a 5/4 flyer, that just kills people. A bunch of 5/4 flyers kills everyone. Next, from the Doctor Who decks, we have Quantum Misalignment. This is 4 and a blue for a sorcery that makes a token copy of a creature we control, except it isn't legendary. Okay, we have another one of these in here. So it's going to give us a second H&K. But it also has Rebound, which is why it costs a single mana more than the usual 4 mana to make a clone. Rebound means when we cast Quantum Misalignment from our hand, we exile it as it resolves, and at the beginning of our next upkeep, we can cast it from exile without paying its mana cost. So if we cast this from our hand, we're going to get to have it rebound. If we cast this from an H&K Death Trigger off the top of our library, it won't rebound. It'll just make a copy that isn't itself legendary. So this does stop the sort of loop, but it does give us a Brainstorm, and that may be able to put us into a good position for whatever we're doing next. Brainstorm is just so strong that having it, in addition to another 5/4 flyer, is pretty nice. Next is Replication Technique from the Strixhaven Commander decks, Commander 21. 4 and a blue for a sorcery with Demonstrate. And what it does is make a token that's a copy of target permanent you control. This is permanent, which means we're probably going to hit our commander with it, but we might hit something else. We might do our Vesuvan Duplimancy. We might hit our Soul Ring, whatever we may need. Maybe we need some lands, who can tell? But Demonstrate says when we cast this spell, we can copy it. We just can freely copy this if we wish to. And if we do, we choose an opponent to also copy it, and they may choose new target, or both players may choose new targets for the copies. What that means is, if we choose to demonstrate this, we don't have to. We can just pay 4 and a blue and make a copy of one of our permanents. But if we do choose to demonstrate it, we get a copy that goes on the stack above the original replication technique, and our chosen opponent gets a copy that goes on the stack above both of our copies. So they are going to get to make a copy of a permanent they control, and then we will make a copy of a permanent we control and then do it again. So we either get 2 and they get 1, which they get to resolve first, or we get just the 1 on our own. So we probably don't want to hit our opponent's, Meteor Golem or Spine of Ishsaw, something that can kill our H&K before our replication techniques resolve targeting it. Even though if they were to do that, we do get H&K's Death Trigger. But we probably want to give them, we want to choose an opponent that is not able to make a copy of something which has its own enters effect that can interfere with the resolution of our replication techniques. But this is a nice way for 4 mana, or for 5 mana, to get 2 copies of H&K that do not come in simultaneously, since this is a copy of replication technique. First, if we were to demonstrate it, our copy will resolve, and we'll do H&K's legend ruling and their enters and death triggers, and then the original one will resolve, and we'll get to do it all over again. Next, we have Zindersplit's Judgment. Zindersplit is a homunculus from Battlebond, from Kylum. For 4 and a blue, we have a sorcery that says, for each player, choose friend or foe. Each friend creates a token that's a copy of a creature they control, and each foe returns a creature they control to its owner's hand. That means, just a comment on this, each foe returns a creature they control to its owner's hand does not mean we get to choose which creature they control. They are choosing which creature they're controlling. But they do bounce a creature, so that is a little bit of removal. In addition, it does not say for each opponent, it says for each player. So Zyndersplit's Judgment will let us make a copy of H and K if we choose friend for ourselves, which presumably we will. What's also nice about this is we can do this in a political way. We're the one who gets to choose friend or foe for each player, but we can say, look, I will choose foe for you unless you do something for me. Or, hey, if you do something for me, I'm happy to choose friend for you. And then they'll be able to make a copy of one of their creatures, and they get to choose which one it is. Presumably, they won't make a copy of their commander because they maybe don't have the benefit that we have of getting a copy of a legendary creature that they already control. But, you know, being able to say, hey, is everyone at the table okay with leaving me alone for the next couple of turns? If so, you can make a copy of one of your creatures and you don't have to bounce one of your creatures instead. A lot of the times, the whole table will agree to that, so you get left alone, if people keep their word, while also getting a copy of your commander. Next is Saheeli's Artistry. Really fun card. 4 and double blue for a sorcery that says choose one or both. Create a token that's a copy of target artifact, or create a token that's a copy of target creature, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types. So the obvious use of this is the second mode, making a token that's a copy of target creature. We target H and K, we get to do the thing that we've been talking about doing. The fact that it's an artifact in addition to its other types doesn't really matter. But we can also make a copy of an artifact if we'd rather do it. Or we can do both. Both. That's crazy. Both. Maybe we make a copy of our, like I keep saying, Soul Ring, or our Arcane Signet, or one of our Manoliths. But it also doesn't say target artifact you control, or target creature you control. Probably we want to hit H and K with this, but who knows? Maybe our opponent has a really cool creature we would like to be able to copy, and once we have that copy of it, we can make more copies of it with the rest of our deck. Probably, again, not as good as H and K, but it's still an option. And maybe someone else has their Soul Ring out and we don't. We can steal that. Maybe they have their own Spine-of-Ish Saw, or, well, they're not going to have a Paradox Engine, but like a Chromatic Orrery, something big and scary and great, we can take and make a copy of as well. Even if all we're doing is copying, I don't know, a Wayfarer's Bauble, that's one more thing that we can get value out of that we wouldn't have otherwise. Thanks, Saheeli's Artistry. Next, from Bloomborough, we have Season of Weaving. 4 and double blue for a sorcery that says we choose up to 5 paw prints worth of modes. We may choose the same mode more than once. For 1 paw print, we draw a card. For 2, we choose an artifact or creature we control, and we create a token that's a copy of it. This, of course, is the central thing we're trying to do with this spell. And then for 3 paw prints, we return each non-land, non-token permanent to its owner's hand. So the typical mode for this, in this deck, is to choose the second mode twice and the first mode once. So we draw a card, and then we make 2 copies of H and K. That's great because that's the order it happens in. We get to draw a card, make 2 copies, of course we legend rule away 2 of our H and Ks, and we get 2 copies of the Interest Trigger and 2 copies of the Death Trigger. But it's nice because we didn't just, once we resolve the first Interest Trigger, we don't just draw 3 cards, we've already drawn 1 more. So we have even 1 more chance of being able to get something good on top of our library for that Death Trigger that's coming up after we resolve our first Brainstorm. But we could, I suppose, if we really want to, or maybe if we already know what's on top of our library because of other Brainstorm triggers that we've resolved already, we might say we only want to make 1 copy of H and K and we want to draw 3 cards. Drawing 3 cards is pretty great, no matter how you slice it. There's also the possibility of returning each non-land, non-token permanent to its owner's hand. That is one of our wraths, even though it's not a full wrath, because it doesn't get rid of tokens. Being able to say, I want to choose to make a copy of H and K, and then bounce everything. Or I want to draw 2 cards, and then bounce everything. That's pretty great. We can, if we were to choose to do both of these 2, make a copy of H and K, and sacrifice our original H and K, keeping the token. The token's still going to get its Interest Trigger, then we legend rule away the original. The original dies, so we still get an Enters and a Death Trigger. We get to do that. We put the original back in our command zone. But if we were to have, let's say, Vesuvan Duplimancy in play or Quantum Misalignment having resolved, maybe we have a non-legendary version of H and K in play. We can then make a token copy of that, or just draw a card, or make a copy of the original one, legend rule away the token copy that is legendary, get its interest and death triggers. And then we bounce everything that's not a token, including the original H and K, and we keep the non-legendary tokens that are in play to still do their fun stuff. Anyway, Season of Weaving has a lot of flexibility in this deck, depending on which lane we've sort of found ourselves in. And even if all we use it for is 6 mana, draw 5 cards, that's pretty okay. Especially if we are in a situation where we've just made 2 copies of H and K, and the first one, we brainstorm Season of Weaving onto the top of our deck. Maybe what we do is we just cast that for free, drain someone for 6, draw 5 cards, and we get to do the next brainstorm, drawing 3 more cards, and we've got so many in our hand that we can definitely find something great to put on top of our library and keep things going, or probably kill someone. Next is Self-Reflection from Lost Caverns of Ixalan. 4 and double blue, we have a sorcery that creates a token that's a copy of target creature we control, and we can flash it back for 3 and a blue. This is more expensive on the front side than Cackling Counterpart, but cheaper on the back side. As opposed to 3 and 7, it's 6 and 4, which is great, because Self-Reflection therefore means it is harder for us to cast initially, but it also drains our opponent more if it's what we're casting off the top of our library using H&K's Death Trigger. And once we've done that, we can start the chain over again if we need to by flashing it back for even cheaper. So a nice sort of mirror to the Cackling Counterpart. Next we have Stolen Identity. Oh, this is a really fun one. So Stolen Identity is 4 and double blue for a sorcery that makes a token that's a copy of target artifact or creature. The usual thing. However, as it resolves, it has Cipher. We can exile it encoded on a creature we control. Encoded just means, well, you're going to see in the next sentence. Whenever that creature deals combat damage to a player, its controller may cast a copy of the encoded card without paying its mana cost. The way you can think of this is sort of like Stolen Identity, it becomes an aura. It's in exile, not the battlefield, so it can't be interacted with. But otherwise, it's kind of like an aura that says, when the enchanted creature deals combat damage, cast Stolen Identity for free. And you're still doing that during the combat damage step. So it ignores the fact that it's a sorcery. So kind of a cool effect. I think the Cipher cards are really fun. I know it feels like a 2-for-1, like an aura, if it gets destroyed. But, I mean, you've already gotten the value out of it. For 6, you've made a copy of something. And then the possibility that maybe H&K is going to be able to do combat damage afterwards. I mean, that's 5 commander damage. And on top of it, you're getting, the interest and death triggers of the copy. That seems good. Next is Sublime Epiphany. So I was playing Magic during M21 Standard, and I love this card. I think it's beautiful. I think it's so much fun. It's absolutely heartbreaking when your opponent has it, and it's just an absolute bomb when you do. It's wonderful. It's another instant for 4 and double blue. It says choose 1 or more. It's got 5 modes. It is the dream to be able to do all 5 modes, but sometimes you can't. The first is counter target spell. Pretty great. The second is counter target activated or triggered ability. Even better. The third is return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. The fourth is create a token that's a copy of target creature you control. And the last is draw a card. So generally, we're going to be doing these last 2 no matter what. And it's 6 mana that we can drain from our opponent if we're casting it from the top of our library with H&K's Death Trigger. But what's especially nice is if we have this in hand and our opponent casts a spell that triggers one of their permanent's triggered abilities. We can cast Sublime Epiphany and do everything. We counter their spell, we counter the triggered ability that they triggered when they cast a spell, we bounce something, maybe whatever permanent triggered, if we want to do that. We make a copy of H&K and we draw a card, and then we resolve the H&K Legend Rule nonsense. Sublime Epiphany is just so much fun. Next we have Supplant Form, which is a copy spell and a removal spell. 4 and double blue for an instant that says return target creature to its owner's hand, and you create a token that's a copy of that creature. So we can do this to our opponent's creature, of course. We bounce their creature at instant speed, which is nice. That's a pretty expensive unsummon, but we then get a copy of it. So maybe they've attacked with 2 giant creatures. We bounce the bigger of the 2, and we get a copy of that, and it eats the other creature, that sort of thing. Or maybe someone decides to cast Murder to kill H&K, We instead bounce H and K and make a token that's a copy of it, sort of saving that copy. So then we get the enters trigger for the copy, and we can, on our turn, replay the original and get the death trigger for the copy. So it's a little bit, like I said before, of a slower, enters and then death trigger situation, but it works pretty well. And if we happen to spin into this or rather stack it on top of our library and then get this from the death trigger of one of our H and Ks, we're going to be able to do take 6 life from someone else, and then bounce either something of theirs or our own H and K. Pretty good. Will of the Teamer is I don't know if it's my favorite one in this deck, but it might be. It's really fun. 5 and a blue for a sorcery that says choose one, and if you control a commander, as you cast the spell, you may choose both instead. As you cast the spell is part of this line because it means if our commander is removed before Will of the Teamer resolves, we still get to choose both. So it says, create a token that's a copy of target permanent, except it's a 4/4 dragon with flying in addition to its other types, which doesn't really matter to us because we're making a copy of H and K and we're going to get rid of the copy either way. But sure, a 4/4 dragon, maybe we're making a copy of a different permanent. We don't have to hit just creatures, and we don't have to hit just our creatures either. We can make a copy of some kind of terrible big commander, or something with a really powerful effect, like a Nyxbloom Ancient or something. But if we're hitting our commander, the fact that it's a 4/4 dragon with flying doesn't really matter, because we have a 5/4 dragon with flying that's going to go away with this token. But in addition, target player draws cards equal to the greatest mana value among permanents you control. So we can hit someone else with that, technically. That's a pretty dangerous politicking thing to do, but we could say, look, I can have you draw 5 cards, because our commander is mana value 5, as long as you give me, whatever you want from that deal. But in all likelihood, what we're doing is we're choosing both of these. We're making a copy of H and K as part of the resolution to this, but we also resolve it by drawing 5 cards. Then the H and K copy will trigger the legend rule, or will activate the legend rule will check. We'll be able to get rid of the new H and K, get its enters and death triggers, brainstorm 3 more cards into our hand. So we've just drawn 8, put 2 on top and get the death trigger. So whichever one of those 8 or whatever we already had in hand is going to give us the best value from that death trigger. Will of the Teamer is very nice. Plus, again, we're into the more expensive instants and sorceries, so we're able to drain our opponent for a lot more from these. Next, we have Clone Legion. Clone Legion, God, this is so fun. Clone Legion is a 9-mana sorcery that says for each creature target player controls, create a token that's a copy of that creature. So yes, we can definitely hit one of our opponents with this, steal their entire board, essentially. Or we can just do this with our board. Maybe this is only H and K, in which case it's a 9-mana spell that hits H and K, and that's unfortunate. That's pretty expensive. Or maybe it's a good one, because if one of our H and Ks puts this on top of our library, and then we are able to kill that H and K, we're going to hit someone for 9 damage and copy this, make another H and K. That's amazing. Being able to find this on the top of our library or put it on the top of our library is just so good. That's what's so powerful about Brainstorm. Knowing that you have a big card in hand that you want to cheat into play, in most decks that feels bad, because you're like, well, it's so hard to cheat this into play if it's in my hand. The only exception usually is like Reanimator. Like, you want to be able to discard it from your hand so that you can then reanimate it from the graveyard. But with Hidetsugu and Kairi, we can just have a different copy of our commander, or just the original copy, enter, and use the Brainstorm effect to take the thing in our hand and put it right on top of our library, then get it off with our death trigger. It's just really powerful. So even better, we might have some of our utility creatures in play, and we get to make token copies of them. We might get an extra Phantom Steed or an extra Zulaport Cutthroat as our Blood Artist, Lots of good value from Clone Legion. Finally, in this section, we are running one of the rooms from Duskmourn. If you haven't seen a room before, this is a split card that is a permanent. It has 2 sides, which they're called doors, and the idea is when it's in your hand, you choose to cast one side of it, and that side will come into the battlefield unlocked, whereas the other side will be locked. then you can, while it's in play, pay the casting cost at sorcery speed of the side that's unlocked to unlock it, and now both effects are in play. So for example, if we were going to cast this from our hand as Mirror Room, we would pay 2 and a blue, it would enter, Mirror Room would be unlocked, and Fractured Realm would be locked. We could then later pay 5 and double blue to unlock Fractured Realm, and we would have the rules text of both sides available on this enchantment. Make sense? If not, I'm sorry, this is a recorded video, you can't respond to me now. But yeah, rooms are a lot of fun, I think. So Mirror Room, the side that we're typically going to cast first, says when you unlock the store, which means when it enters, or we were to pay to unlock it if it's already entered, we make a token that's a copy of target creature we control, except it's a reflection in addition to its other creature types. This doesn't mean anything inherently, it's just an extra creature type, the same way that Will of the Teamer would make something into a dragon. So yeah, we can, for 3 mana, just make a token copy of H and K. That seems pretty good. Fractured Realm says if a triggered ability of a permanent we control triggers, that ability triggers an additional time. That means if we make 1 copy of H and K and then Legend Rule it away, we get 2 enters and 2 death triggers, and we can stack them all at the same in whatever way we want, since it all goes on the stack at the same time. Fractured Realm helps us not just with our H and Ks, but with so many other of our permanents. For example, Vasublin Duplimancy is a triggered ability. So if we cast a clone spell on our commander with Vasublin Duplimancy in play, and with Fractured Realm unlocked, we get 2 Vasublin Duplimancy triggers, which means 2 non-legendary copies. Yeah, just looking for other good examples of permanents that we can do that with. But yeah, that's good enough. Being able to... oh, here's another one. Stolen Identity. If it is ciphered and encoded onto our commander, then our commander has a whenever it deals combat damage to a player trigger. That's a triggered ability. We'd be able to cast Stolen Identity twice since it's encoded onto our commander if our commander does the commander damage or does combat damage thanks to Fractured Realm. So very nice. Also worth noting, if Fractured Realm gets into the battlefield first, then when we unlock Mirror Room, this will trigger twice. We will get to make 2 copies because Mirror Room / Fractured Realm is a permanent that we control. And, oh, I'm sorry, and this is a triggered ability, yeah. So, because it's triggered by us unlocking the room. Even though we're unlocking the room and that's causing this is not an activated ability, it's a triggered ability because it begins with when, whenever, or at. Last thing I'd like to mention. The death trigger for our commander looks at the mana value of the card we exile from the top of our library. We can only cast that card from exile for free if it is an instant or sorcery. Otherwise, it's just exiled. But it does look at the mana value, no matter what, and it just goes into exile forever if we can't cast it as an instant or sorcery. Mirror Room and Fractured Realm is a split card, which means in this case, when it's on the top of our library, or when it goes to exile rather, and our commander's death trigger is looking at its mana value, we add these 2 mana costs together to get its mana value. This is a 10 mana card, or 10 mana value card, with respect to what our commander's death trigger cares about. So even if we decide to put this on top of our library, or it just happens to be, when we have our death trigger for our commander resolve, if this is the card we exile, we will not be able to cast it, but we will have one of our opponents lose 10 life. That's a huge hit. Definitely worth remembering. So that is our copies section. We have already seen our clones section, but I just want to make mention of it because Mirror Hall Mimic is a clone. It's not just a copy. It's a creature that can come in as a copy of our commander, and we have a benefit from that once it goes to the graveyard, but there are also other clones, like I mentioned, in the considering section at the bottom of this deck list on the Moxfield page. So if you want to go for more of a clones theme, I don't think it will be quite as good because it doesn't help the triggers from our commander's death trigger, but it's an option for you, and there are plenty of other clones tagged that way in this deck list. So we've seen a lot of the game plan. There's a lot of things that supplement this game plan, but I want to talk now about our categories of support. We're going to start with our card advantage section, which I have tagged as draw, not because all of these cards actually draw us cards, but because it's a shorthand that I use for card advantage. So we've seen 3 steps ahead. It can give us a catalog effect, which lets us draw 2 and discard a card if we want. Next is Keen Duelist, also from the Strixhaven Commander 21 decks. This is 1 and a black for a 2/2 human wizard that says, at the beginning of your upkeep, you and target opponent each reveal the top card of your library. You each lose life equal to the mana value of the card revealed by the other player, and you each put the card you revealed into your hand. So essentially, this is us choosing someone else, and we both get to draw a card. We just have to show what those cards are, and we each lose life equal to the mana value of the card that the other person put in their hand. Since we have such big things in our hand, and we want to have our opponents lose life based on the mana value of the things we have on top of our library, this is a pretty good way to ensure, beyond just the death trigger of our commander, that our opponents are losing life that way. Plus, it's a little bit like Phyrexian Arena. We're essentially getting an extra card draw each turn, but it's costing us some life. That's a pretty black effect, and it's worth doing. Greatness at any cost is the reference to Bob that we're doing here with this very weird reversal Bob. So, next is Mindstone. Mindstone is really in the deck more for ramp. It's a 2-mana rock that taps for colorless, but we can, if we need, pay 1, tap and sack it to draw a card. Maybe we won't need the mana later on, and we just need 1 more card in our hand. Next is Ominous Seas. Ominous Seas is 1 and a blue for an enchantment. This is whenever we draw a card, we put a foreshadow counter on it. Foreshadow counters don't mean anything inherently. They're used by its next ability, which is, if we remove 8 foreshadow counters from it, we make an 8/8 blue Kraken creature token, which is, that's at an instant speed. It doesn't say activate only as a sorcery. So we can have, suddenly, big blockers or attackers that are just Kraken, and we can crack in with them. Haha. Anyway, it's in the draw section, the card advantage section, because it also has cycling for 2 generic, which means while it's in our hand, we can pay 2 and discard it to draw a card. If we really don't need it, we can draw off of it. That's okay. Same principle as with Mindstone. Next, I have yet to try to pronounce this guy's name. It's Vinwixt, let's say. Vinwixt, Verbose Host, is 1 and a blue for an 0/4 legendary homunculus from Aetherdrift. And I believe from the Magic Spellslingers mobile game that was canceled. Anyway, seems like a cool friend. Vinwixt has Start Your Engines, which means if you have no speed, which we wouldn't have a reason to have speed in this deck otherwise, you gain a speed, which starts at 1. And it increases once each of your turns when an opponent loses life. So only once, and only on our turns, and only when any opponent loses life. And then speed maxes out at 4. So the number of the speed doesn't matter. All that matters is that it goes up to 4, and it only increments by 1 on each of our turns once when an opponent loses life. But our opponents are losing life pretty regularly on our turns with all of these H&K shenanigans. Vinwixt gives us no maximum hand size. Pretty great if we're drawing so many cards with our draw spells on top of our brainstorms. And once our speed is 4, we have max speed, and Vinwixt now gives us the ability, whenever we draw a card, instead draw 2 cards. This is Teferi's Ageless Insight. That's just excellent. It means that our commander's Enters trigger, which is just Brainstorm, it now doesn't have us draw 3 and put 2 on the top of our library. It has us draw 6 and put 2 on the top of our library, because it replaces the draw 3 with... Because every time you draw a card, you're drawing 1 card at a time. They're always separate instances of draw by the game rules. So that means we're drawing 1 card, and therefore 2, then 1 more card, and therefore 2, and then 1 more card, and therefore 2. And then we put 2 back on the top. So draw 6, stack 2. So Vinwixt, very nice in this. It's a 2-mana 0/4, which can be an okay blocker. It gives us no maximum hand size, and the Start Your Engines thing, the likelihood that this is going to come up, it might. We're definitely draining our opponents basically every turn with our clone effects and our commander's death triggers. So yeah, pretty good. Just worth remembering for your speed, you can't increase your speed on turns other than yours. But your speed starts at 1, and if you have Vinwix come in, our speed becomes 1, and then our opponent loses life. Well, they haven't lost life yet that turn, so our speed immediately goes to 2. So we might be able to get up to max speed just 2 turns after Vinwix comes in. Next, we have Dragon's Horde. Dragon's Horde is a manalith. It's a 3-mana artifact that taps for 1 mana of any color. But it also says whenever a dragon we control enters, we put a gold counter on this artifact, and we can tap it and remove a gold counter to draw a card. That's important because our commander is a dragon, as well as being a demon and an ogre. So every time one of our commander's clones or copies comes into play, a dragon has entered. So we put a gold counter on the Dragon's Horde. It doesn't have to stay in play, and it doesn't have to be in play for longer than it takes for the state-based actions to put it in our graveyard thanks to the legend rule. But it did enter each of those copies, so we do get a gold counter on the Dragon's Horde, and we're going to be able to tap it for either mana or card draw, basically every chance we get. Next we have Midnight Clock from Throne of Eldraine. Love this card. 2 and a blue for an artifact that taps for blue, so it's like a manalith, but it doesn't make black for us. We can also pay 2 and a blue to put an hour counter on it, which again, hour counters are used by this card. They don't have an inherent meaning. And at the beginning of each upkeep, we put an hour counter on this artifact. So in a 4-player commander game, we're going to cast Midnight Clock. It's going to land on the battlefield, and during our next opponent's upkeep, we'll put an hour counter on it. Same thing for the opponent after that, and the opponent after that, and then back to us during our upkeep, it'll have 4 counters. Then, when the 12th hour counter is put on this artifact, we shuffle our hand and graveyard into our library and draw 7 cards and exile Midnight Clock. Which means, assuming no one leaves the game, we're going to play this, and 3 turns later, this will be able to trigger in our upkeep, and we'll be able to get a fresh 7. If we're willing to put mana into it, we can have it happen earlier, maybe on someone else's turn. So we get a fresh 7 maybe on our opponent to the right's turn, and then the turn after that, we draw another card, and we have 8 cards in hand at the start of our turn. Seems pretty good. We have Archmage Emeritus in this. For 2 and double blue, we have a human wizard with that's a 2/2 with Magecraft. Whenever we cast or copy an instant or sorcery, we draw a card. So we have a couple of ways to copy our instants and sorceries, like C double, for example. But most of all, we're running 31 instants and sorceries. So just casting those, being able to put an extra card in our hand is pretty great. This is an excellent way to get repeated card advantage from doing what we're going to be doing already. Next is Teferi Temporal Pilgrim. I'm really kind of surprised to see Teferi only being about $3. For 3 and double blue, this is a Planeswalker, a Teferi Planeswalker, that comes in with 4 loyalty, and it says whenever you draw a card, put a loyalty counter on Teferi. That's the only way to put loyalty counters on Teferi, because he doesn't have any plus abilities. But for 0, we can draw a card. So that's sort of like a +1, because drawing a card will trigger his ability and put a counter on him. So Teferi gives us repeated card draw from his 0 ability. We can also -2 him to make a 2/2 blue spirit creature token with Vigilance that has the ability, whenever we draw a card, put a 1/1 counter on this token. So it's a spirit that gets a 1/1 counter at the same time Teferi gets a loyalty counter. Pretty nice. That is my usual start once I play Teferi. Drop him down to 2, make a spirit, so that spirit can block and protect Teferi. And then the next turn, we'll draw for our draw step. The spirit will become a 3/3, and Teferi will have 3 loyalty. And then, if we are able to ultimate Teferi for 12, -12 is target opponent chooses a permanent they control and returns it to its owner's hand, then they shuffle each non-land permanent they control into its owner's library. They do not draw a fresh 7, they don't draw anything. The only thing that goes into their hand is the permanent that they chose to bounce. And then everything that isn't a land on their board just goes away. It's back in their library. So this is another Wrath. Even though it affects only one person and it does not get rid of the card that they put in their hand, except by putting it in their hand, it's pretty worth it. Notably, -12 seems like very hard to get to with a Planeswalker, but in a deck where every time our commander comes in, we're drawing 3 cards, it's pretty likely to be able to put at least 4 counters on Teferi every turn. One from this draw effect, and then 3 more from a clone. But if we are able to chain clones into each other, we're going to be drawing and drawing and drawing. I've definitely played Teferi in my testing of this deck and ended up with north of 20 loyalty the next turn. Excellent Planeswalker. We've seen Season of Weaving and how with 1 paw print we can draw a card. Sublime Epiphany, whenever we cast it, no reason not to use that last mode to draw a card. Will of the Teamer can draw us cards equal to the greatest mana value among permanents we control. Next up is Discovery Dispersal. This is another split card. So again, if we reveal this off the top of our library, we're going to be able to drain an opponent for the combined mana cost of both sides, which is 7. Revealing off the top of our library, of course, as part of Hidetsugu and Kairi's death trigger. So, Discovery is a sorcery that has a Surveil 2 and then draw a card. That's pretty good. We get to have a little card selection and then put something in our hand. And Dispersal is an instant that says each opponent returns a non-land permanent they control with the greatest mana value among permanents they control to its owner's hand and then discards a card. So it's a bounce and a discard, so it's even better than just the bounce kind of removal. Although it does cost 5 mana, but it does hit each opponent. Now they're the one that gets to choose which permanent they're bouncing, of course. So the way this works with our commander, if this is on top of our library when our commander's death trigger resolves, what's going to happen is a player is going to, one of our target opponents is going to lose life equal to the mana value of this card, which is again 7, and then we may cast that card if it's an instant or sorcery, which means at that point we get to choose one side or the other. We do not get to choose both. That's not how a split card works. But it is an instant or sorcery, so we can cast this instant or this sorcery, whichever one we want. It will not give us the benefit of both, but when it comes to deciding how much mana or how much life an opponent loses, we are looking at the mana value of the card, not of the particular spell. I will prove that right now. Target opponent loses life equal to its mana value, like the top card of their library. It's referring to a card, not to a spell. It's only referring to, it doesn't refer to spells at all. So if it's an instant or sorcery card, we can cast it. And then casting a split card, of course, you have to choose which side you're using, unless, of course, it has Fuse. So getting back to these. Next up is Aminatu's Augury. Aminatu's Augury is so expensive. So 8 mana, if you get to cast this off the top of your library, you're going to be having a great time with your commander's death trigger. For 6 and double blue, we get a sorcery that says exile the top 8 cards of your library. You may put a land card from among them onto the battlefield. Until end of turn, for each non-land card type, you may cast a spell of that type from among the exiled cards without paying its mana cost. So card types, of course, are creature, artifact, sorcery, instant, planeswalker, and so forth. So if we exile 3 different sorceries, we can only cast one of them. But until end of turn, we can cast one of those sorceries without paying its mana cost. Now, because it says until end of turn, that means we don't cast them as part of the resolution of Aminatu's Augury. So if this is the card with our commander's death trigger that we reveal off the top, we exile rather, we can drain an opponent for 8, then cast this. We will exile these 8 cards, put them off to the side. If there's a land among them, we can put it on the battlefield as part of the resolution of this spell. And then the spell is done resolving, and we have permission until end of turn to cast a spell without paying its mana cost of each non-land card type among those cards still exiled. At the end of turn, anything remaining in exile will stay in exile for the rest of the game. That's how it works. So this gives us an awful lot, and it drains someone for 8. Seems good. We've got 3 more cards that cost more than 8, so let's take a look at them. Dig Through Time is 6 and double blue for an instant, ignore this for a moment, that says look at the top 7 cards of your library, put 2 of them in your hand, and the rest in the bottom in a random order. That's pretty great for an effect. It does cost 8 mana, but it also has Delve, which means each card we exile from our graveyard while casting the spell pays 1 generic. So we might be able to cast this. If we're willing to exile 6 cards from our graveyard, we only have to pay the 2 blue. That's pretty great. Or we put this on top of our library with a brainstorm effect, And then when our commander or one of its clones or copies dies, we get to cast this, we get to exile Dig Through Time, drain someone for 8, and cast it for free. So we get its effect without having to worry about the delve, since we're doing it without paying its mana cost. Then it goes to the graveyard for us maybe to use for a different delve spell. But why would we have any other delve spells? Because Treasure Cruise is legal. Treasure Cruise is the same kind of idea. It is a sorcery rather than an instant. It costs 7 and a blue, and it says draw 3 cards. So if we were to cast this from our hand and delve it away the 7, this is Ancestral Recall. 1 blue to draw 3. It's not Ancestral Recall because it can't target someone else, but it's close enough. It's close enough. What is the, it's banned in Modern, banned in several other things. Very good card. And again, if we cast it using our commander's death trigger, we're draining someone for 8 and we're drawing 3 from that. Oftentimes, that doesn't keep things going with respect to our clone schemes, but we did just draw the other card that we brainstormed to the top plus 2 others. So we have a pretty good chance of getting things going in some powerful way, no matter what. Finally, we have another split card, kind of. This is Commit to Memory. Commit to Memory is an Aftermath card, which means when this is in our hand, we can only cast one side of it, and that side is Commit, the instant. It's the one that's sort of face up to us when we're holding the card normally. It's 3 and a blue for an instant that says put target spell or non-land permanent into its owner's library second from the top. So this gets us a way of tucking any non-land permanent that we don't want someone to have, or a spell that they're in the process of casting. If we don't want it to resolve, we can target a spell while it's still in the stack, and it just goes second to the top of their library. If we hit someone's commander with this, they have the ability to choose to, instead of putting it second from the top of their library, they can put it instead into their command zone. But, as maybe you've heard me say in past instances of these videos where I use Commit to Memory, I've definitely had a friend say, no, it's second from the top of my library, no big deal, I can put my commander in my library and then I'll just draw them and cast them without having to pay the commander tax. The reason that's an issue is because of the other half of this card. Memory is a sorcery for 4 and double blue that has Aftermath, which means we cannot cast Memory from anywhere other than our graveyard. And when we cast it from our graveyard, we exile it at the end of resolution. So Memory, once this card is in our graveyard, we can cast it from there just for paying 4 and double blue, which means if we commit it, Commit will resolve, it'll go to the graveyard, and we can then cast Memory either on that same turn or on a later turn. Memory says each player shuffles their hand and graveyard into their library, then draws 7 cards. This is the reason that whatever you hit with Commit is put second from the top. So, for example, in the instance I mentioned, my friend put their commander second from the top of their library. We went around the table, they drew the top card of their library, so now their commander is the top card of their is left on top of their library. And on my next turn, I cast Memory, which makes them shuffle their hand and graveyard into their library. So because their commander was still on top of their library, it didn't change zones. So they had to shuffle it away. They weren't allowed at that point to put it in the command zone. So Commit to Memory, very strong. It does cost a lot of mana, but it is really fun as well, and it's a different wheel effect for us, so that we can get another 7 cards in our hand, sort of like we had with our Midnight Clock. In addition, it's worth recognizing that if we get to cast this using our commander's death trigger, if we exile this, drain someone, and then get to cast it for free, we can only cast Commit. It's not like the split card we saw earlier, where we get to choose an instant or sorcery, because even though both Commit and Memory are an instant or are the right type for that, instant or sorcery, Memory can only be cast from the graveyard. That's what Aftermath means. So we're not able to cast Commit, we're not able to cast Memory, rather, if we were to exile this with our commander's death trigger, because it's then in exile, which is not the graveyard, so we're not allowed to cast Memory from it. We would be able to commit, however, and, as with before we cast it, we look at its mana value, which is the combined mana cost of both halves of it. So it would drain an opponent for 10, and then we get to cast Commit for free. Commit would put itself into the graveyard as part of resolution, and we could cast Memory later when we wanted to. So that covers all of our card advantage. Of course, Commit to Memory is card advantage because we get to wheel. Let's take a look at our acceleration, which I've just shorthanded into ramp. Not all this is actually ramp, but it is all acceleration. So Soul Ring. Everyone knows Soul Ring. It costs 1, taps for 2, it should be in your deck. Great card. The same is true of Arcane Signet, generally. It costs 2, and is an artifact that taps for 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity. So in this deck, it's a 2 mana rock that taps for blue or black. 2 mana rocks are great, we want that. Dimir Signet is another 2 mana rock. It taps for blue and black. It makes 2 mana, but in order to activate it, you have to pay 1 mana into it. So you're sort of tapping 2 mana sources, whatever's made the mana you're paying into it, and the Signet itself, to make 2 mana. So it filters that mana. Not terrible, just means it can't be tapped on its own. Next is Imrakul's Messenger from Modern Horizons 3. This is 1 and a blue for a 2/1 Eldrazi Fairy Rogue with Devoid, meaning this is not a blue spell, this card has no color. And that says card because this functions in all zones. May be relevant. If someone says, I block with my creature that has protection from blue, you say, that's too bad, Imrakul's Messenger is not blue, it's Devoid. It also has flying, so it's a 2/1 flying fairy, of course. It also says, whenever we draw our second card each turn, we create a 0/1 colorless Eldrazi spawn creature token with sacrifice this creature and add 1 colorless mana. So what this means is every time our commander enters the battlefield, or a copy of our commander enters the battlefield, we're going to draw 3 cards and put 2 back on top of our library, which means we've drawn our second card for the turn. It was the first one of those cards that we drew, because that was second after the one we drew in our draw step. This will not trigger every 2 cards we draw, it's only the second card each turn, which means at most it'll trigger once per turn. But that's maybe once every turn we get a bonus little friend, little 0/1. These Eldrazi spawn are ramp pieces, because you do not have to tap them to sacrifice them for mana, so we can do it as soon as they come in, even if they have Summoning Sickness. We can use them to block, and in response to the block, tap them for mana, use them for something like that. But just having them, and every turn that we do our stuff with our commander, we're going to get to have a free little bit of mana sitting around that could also block if we need it to. Seems good. We've seen the Mind Stone, it can tap for colorless, it is another 2 mana rock. Sapphire Medallion is kind of a 2 mana rock. It's 2 mana for an artifact, but it doesn't tap for mana. It just makes our blue spells cost 1 less to cast. It only reduces the generic mana cost, and only, of course, on blue spells. But if we cast a spell that's blue and black, well, that spell is blue. That includes our commander. So this is a great discount for most of our spells. We are more of a blue deck than we are a black deck, so we're not running the Jet Medallion, which is also much more expensive than Sapphire Medallion. But this is a good include in here that can usually give us the equivalent of more than 1, sometimes more than 2 mana every turn. Talisman of Dominance is another 2 mana rock. For 2 mana, we get an artifact that taps for colorless, or we can tap it for blue or black if we're willing to have it deal 1 damage to us when we do. Typically, these talismans are worth running, because it's 2 mana for a rock that always taps for mana, and if we really need the colored pip, it's worth 1 damage. Usually, as our mana base gets better and while the game goes on, we're going to have to tap this for colored mana less and less, and we can just tap it for the colorless if we need to. But if we're desperate for colored mana, spending 1 life for it is totally worth it. Thought Vessel is next. It's a 2 mana rock that taps for colorless, and it gives us no maximum hand size. Really nice in a deck where we're drawing so many cards and brainstorming so much. Ancient Cellar Spawn is next. This card is so much fun. 1 and double black, gives us a 3/3 enchantment creature horror that says each spell you cast that's a demon, horror, or nightmare costs 1 generic less to cast. This card does not discount any of our spells except our commander. It doesn't even discount our clones. So demon, horror, or nightmare. We don't have... Oh, no, I'm sorry. We have a few other horrors. That's true. Good. I guess itself is one of them, but we have 2 other horrors besides Ancient Cellar Spawn, so those will be discounted by it. And our commander is a dragon, so it will be discounted by 1. So paying 3 to discount our commander every time we have to cast our commander, which hopefully is only once, but if we have to recast it from the command zone, that little discount is nice. However, in addition, whenever we cast a spell, any spell, if the amount of mana spent to cast it was less than its mana value, target opponent loses life equal to the difference. That means every time one of our H&K clones dies, or the original, when we get our death trigger, we're going to reveal the top card of our library, and assuming it's any kind of spell, someone is going to lose life. And then, if it was an instant or sorcery, we get to cast it without paying its mana value, which means we've cast a spell, and the amount of mana we spent to cast it was 0, so we're going to drain someone for the difference between its mana value and 0, which is to say, just its mana value again. So we can use this to double up. Maybe we have one of our 8 mana instants and sorceries on top of our library, like Amanatu's Offering. One of our H&Ks dies, we reveal Amanatu's Offering, drain them for 8, cast Amanatu's Offering, and Ancient Cellar Spawn triggers, sees that we've cast something and that its mana value is greater than the amount of mana we spent to cast it, and then they get drained for the same amount again. 16 damage, and an Amanatu's Offering on top of it. We also have Decanter of Endless Water. This is another manalith. It's 3 mana for a rock that adds 1 mana of any color, and it gives us no maximum hand size. 1 more mana for a Thought Vessel that taps for colored mana. That's what the Decanter of Endless Water is. Very nice. Also, it is a fish, I believe. Maybe it's just the other art makes it look like a fish, but anyway, cool card. We've seen Dragon's Horde. It's a manalith that we can also maybe draw cards from. Also from Baldur's Gate, like the Decanter of Endless Water, is the Lapis Orb of Dragonkind. 2 and a blue gives us an artifact that only taps for blue, but when we spend this mana to cast a dragon creature spell, we scry 2. So, similar to the Midnight Clock, we're spending 3 mana for an artifact, and all it does is tap for blue, essentially. But the ability to scry 2 is pretty nice when we care about having specific cards on top of our library. So, if we're casting our commander with this, which is, of course, a dragon spell, we scry 2, and we know that we're going to draw whatever's on top of our library. So if we don't see something we really want to be part of our hand, or to be on our library, on the top of our library for next turn or the turn after, we can just bottom those with our scry and maybe get something better. So this kind of selection is really helpful every time we're going to be casting our commander again and again, which may be because it's been removed, or maybe we've supplant formed it back to our hand, and we want to cast it again for that reason. We've seen our Midnight Clock and how it taps for blue mana. We've seen Amanatu's Augury and how when it resolves, if among the top 8 cards of our library we had a land, we could put it on the battlefield. Finally, we have another one of our Wraths. It's Blood Money. 5 and double black for a sorcery, has us destroy all creatures, and for each non-creature token destroyed this way, we create a tapped treasure token. So that's every creature that wasn't a token on the entire battlefield, not just our creatures. We get treasure. We can't use it this turn because it's tapped, but we can sure use it next turn. And while this does kill our commander, that's usually how Wraths work. And our commander, remember, has a death trigger that I don't know why I said remember, like you haven't been listening to this whole video and me saying it over and over. Anyway, it gives us a benefit that most creatures and most commanders don't have when they die, especially because our benefit is so strong. In addition, Blood Money is 7 mana and it's a sorcery. So if we have Blood Money in our hand and we put it on top of our library, or we otherwise can cast it using our commander's death trigger, it will, like, maybe the death trigger that's happening is just our commander, and we don't have a clone doing this. So we kill everything. We don't lose our commander from it since we're casting this, and someone gets drained for 7 as well. Or perhaps we put this on the top of our library with a clone, getting the death trigger. What I'm trying to say is, our commander's in play, we make a clone of it, we brainstorm. We put 2 big instants and sorceries on top of our library, the top one of which is Blood Money. That clone's death trigger exiles Blood Money, casts it, and we make it the tapped treasures for all the non-token creatures that we destroy. which includes our original commander. We put that back in the command zone, but it did die, so it gets a death trigger, and the second card we put on top of our library with the clone's Brainstorm, we'll be able to cast that too and drain someone else. Plus, we've wiped all their boards. Blood Money is very nice in this deck. Or very mean, whatever way you want to see it. Next is our interaction section, which, like before, I have tagged removal just as a shorthand. So 3 steps ahead gives us the ability to counter spells. That's removal. Feed the Swarm, you haven't seen yet. 1 and a black for a sorcery. It says destroy target creature or enchantment an opponent controls, and you lose life equal to that permanent's mana value. I know there's at least one other way in black to get rid of enchantments, but I like Feed the Swarm. I know it's sorcery speed, but it's only 2 mana, and being able to hit any creature we want and lose some life, it's fine if we're losing life. Everyone else in this, from our deck, everyone else at the table is going to be losing a lot more life than us. We've seen Saw in half. It makes token copies that are half the power and toughness rounded up of whatever we shoot. Maybe we're hitting our commander with this, but if not, we can remove something else. Deem Inferior is 3 and a blue for a sorcery that costs 1 less for each card we've drawn this turn. So generally, since we're casting this at sorcery speed, usually, it's going to only cost 3 for us. It might cost even less if we cast this off of the death trigger of a clone, because that clone will have just come in, we will have brainstormed, so we've drawn at least 3 or 4 cards this same turn. So this is only going to cost the 1 when we cast it for free off the top of our library, even though it's still going to drain our opponent for 4. And it says the owner of target non-land permanent puts it into their library second from the top, or on the bottom. They get to choose. So this is either a commit for the second from the top thing, or they put it on the bottom of their library and they're likely not to see it again. Next is Live or Die from Duskmourn. 3 and double black gives us an instant that says choose one. Either return target creature card from our graveyard to the battlefield, or destroy target creature. So this is just an overcosted murder, but we can also use it to instant speed reanimate one of our creatures. Maybe our original H&K has gone to the graveyard, we've gotten their death trigger, and with the death trigger on this, we know that we have Live or Die on top of our library because we brainstormed it there. So we put H&K into the graveyard rather than the command zone. Then Live or Die gets exiled as part of the resolution of their death trigger, and we get to choose to reanimate H&K with it after we drain someone for 5. Pretty sweet. Or we could just use it to kill something. That's good too. We've seen Zindersplit's Judgment, which means if we choose foe for any creature, for any one of our opponents, they will have to sacrifice a creature of their choice. Or rather, not sacrifice, but bounce it to their hand. Sublime Epiphany, of course, counters spells and or activated and triggered abilities. Supplant Form bounces a creature, and then we get a token copy of that creature. Dispersal has each of our opponents bounce one of their non-land permanents with the greatest mana value, and then they have to discard a card. And of course, Commit tuck something, a spell or a non-land permanent, second from the top of the owner's library. That covers our interaction. We're going to take a look at all of our Wraths now, 3 of which we've seen. If Teferi can ultimate, Teferi can essentially wipe one of our opponent's boards. Season of Weaving returns all the non-land non-tokens that everyone controls to their owner's hands. Blood Money destroys all creatures, and we make tapped treasures. And then Necromantic Selection is 4 and triple black, so 7 mana. Great for us to cast with our commander's death trigger. It gives us a sorcery that destroys all creatures, and then we return a creature put into a graveyard this way to the battlefield under our control. It's a black zombie in addition to its other types and colors, and we exile Necromantic Selection. So really excellent to be able to cast with a clone's death trigger, because much the same way we would do in the scenario I was describing with Blood Money, we use the clone's enters trigger to put Necromantic Selection on top of our library, use its death trigger to destroy all creatures. We get our commander's death trigger on the stack, but not until after our commander has resolved, or has basically Necromantic Selection resolves all at once. So it will destroy our commander, which will put a death trigger on the stack, but also return our commander from the graveyard to the battlefield as a zombie in addition to its other colors and types. So we're also getting its interest trigger. And since they both go on the stack after Necromantic Selection has resolved, we get to put them on in whatever order we want. So we will get another interest trigger followed by the death trigger is the way we should stack it. And our commander is just sitting there waiting for something. So yeah, good wraths. So that covers our support section. We're going to look at our supplements to all of this, starting with our drain section. These are ways for us to drain our opponents of life in ways that, as we are going through our deck, to just keep draining our opponents for life beyond just what our commander's death trigger does. We've seen Keen Duelist and how Keen Duelist sort of bobs wrong. We get to get an extra card in our hand, so does an opponent, but they'll lose life equal to the mana value of our card, and we will do the same for them. Zulaport Cutthroat, I mentioned earlier, is our Blood Artist for the deck. 1 and a black gives us a 1/1 human rogue ally that says whenever this creature or another creature we control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and we gain 1 life. So this is just a nice little added bonus to the process of looping our way through our commander and all the copies we're making of it. Every time one of our copies dies, or any of our creatures do, we're going to drain each of our opponents for 1, and we'll gain a life. So it's going to be able to hit everybody, as opposed to our commander's death trigger, which only hits 1 person, of course. So yeah, the Zulaport Cutthroat is just a nice way to whittle everyone down more and more and more. Next is our Ancient Cellar Spawn, of course. It can sort of double up on the drain effect from our commander's death trigger. Bastion of Remembrance is another Blood Artist. 2 and a black gives us an enchantment that when it enters, we make a 1/1 white human soldier creature token. So we get a little token friend. And it says whenever a creature we control dies, each opponent loses a life and we gain a life. So that's the same thing as Zulaport Cutthroat. Kami of Jealous Thirst. I think this is a really fun inclusion in this deck. Is it good? I think it's fun. This is a 1/3 spirit for 2 and a black that has Death Touch, so a great blocker. And it has 1 ability that costs 4 and a black that says each opponent loses 2 and we gain 2. But it costs 4 and a black less to activate if we've drawn 3 or more cards this turn. We only activate this once each turn. So if we really want to pay 5 for this, we can drain everyone for 2 and gain 2. But maybe we had any copy of Hidetsugu and Kairi enter the battlefield. And if we did, they just drew us 3 cards on their own. So that means this is a free ability for us to activate. We can only activate it once a turn, but it doesn't say at sorcery speed. So even if someone is going to try and kill it after we've got a bunch of things on the stack after we've brainstormed, we can activate it in response and drain everyone for 2 and gain our 2 life. We also have Psychosis Crawler, really excellent in this deck. 5 generic mana, gives us a star artifact creature Phyrexian Horror, with power and toughness each equal to the number of cards in our hand. So oftentimes this is a pretty big creature in our deck. But in addition, whenever we draw a card, each opponent loses 1 life, which means every time we do our Hidetsugu and Kairi interest trigger, every time we brainstorm, we're drawing 3 cards, putting 2 back on the top of our deck, but that did draw 3 cards, so each opponent will lose 3 life. Finally, we have Grave Endeavor. This is another way to bring things back from the graveyard, and it's at instant speed, even though it's 7 mana. Grave Endeavor costs 5 and double black for an instant that says roll 2 10-sided dice and choose 1 result. Return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield with a number of +1/+1 counters on it equal to that result. Then each opponent loses X life and we gain X life, where X is the other result. So we're rolling our D10s, and it doesn't matter what creature card we want to get back. It's not like we're getting back a creature card with mana value equal to the result of one of the D10s. We're getting back any creature card in our graveyard, and it gets that much bigger. And then we drain our opponent for the other result. So maybe we need to get back Hidetsugu and Kairi. Maybe they have died and we've let them go to the graveyard because we know Grave Endeavor is on top of our library. We will exile it as part of the death trigger, drain someone for 7, and then we know Hidetsugu and Kairi is coming back with a number of counters equal to the lower result of the 2d10 that we rolled, because we want to drain each opponent for the greater result and gain that much life. Pretty sweet. That is our drain section. Let's go to our payoff section. We've got 10 cards that are benefited by us doing so much of what we're doing, much of which is just drawing cards. So Emrakul's Messenger, we've already seen. Whenever we draw our second card each turn, we make an Eldrazi spawn. Ominous Seas, whenever we draw a card, we get a Foreshadow counter, that 8 of which can become an 8/8 Kraken. Chasm Skulker is next. Chasm Skulker is 2 and a blue for a 1/1 Squid Horror. This is one of those horrors we were talking about before that Ancient Cellar Spawn can discount. It says whenever we draw a card, we put a 1/1 counter on Chasm Skulker. And when it dies, we make a number of 1/1 blue squid creature tokens with Island Walk equal to the number of counters on the Skulker. So Island Walk, if you haven't seen it before, means those squid are not blockable by any player who controls a land with the island type. Even without that though, getting a whole bunch of little 1/1s, those are good blockers. Those can be a good wide board to attack with. I mean, even before that, we're drawing a lot of cards in this deck. 3 cards every time one of our H&Ks comes in. So the Chasm Skulker jumps from a 1/1 to a 4/4 to a 7/7 to a 10/10 and so forth. Next is Detective of the Month. I think this card is really fun. I'm really excited to see it in this deck. 2 and a blue for a 2/3 human detective with Ascend, which means at any point while Detective of the Month is in play, if we control 10 or more permanents, that includes our lands and our tokens, then we get the City's Blessing and we have it for the rest of the game. We do not need to retain Detective of the Month to keep the City's Blessing. Ascend just means if at any point we control 10 or more permanents while this Ascend permanent is in play, we get the City's Blessing and we will keep it for the rest of the game. Detective of the Month does say, as long as we have the City's Blessing, detectives we control can't be blocked. This ability, even though we will always have the City's Blessing once we get it, this ability is tied to the permanent that it's on. So if someone removes Detective of the Month, our detectives no longer have unblockable. But how many detectives are we running? Basically as many as we need, because whenever we draw our second card each turn, we make a 2/2 blue and white detective creature token. So getting this little 2/3 friend in play, and then getting to the point where we have 10 or more permanents is not that hard. And then what is our opponent going to do? Spend a removal spell on a 2/3? Spend a removal spell on a 2/3 that has made a couple of 2/2s? Spend a removal spell on that 2/3 because all the 2/2s it's made and itself, because it is also a detective, have been attacking unblockably for a little while? Maybe at that point, sure, but we've already gotten our value out of it by then. Next is Kami of Jealous Thirst. We've already seen how it's a payoff because we can activate its drain ability for free once per turn if we've drawn 3 or more cards this turn. Next we have Mindless Conscription, really cool from Modern Horizons 3. 2 and a black for an enchantment that says when this enchantment enters, and when we draw our third card each turn, we amass zombies 3. Amass zombies means we make a 0/0 zombie artifact creature token if we don't have any armies already. And we put 3 +1/+1 counters on any army we control. So generally, it's just going to be the 1 token, because we put 3 counters on an army if we already control one, and if we don't, we make one first and then put the counters on it. And it's just also a zombie. So we're going to be able to, essentially each turn, if we do our H&K thing that turn, we're going to be able to make our zombie army 3 bigger. So Mindless Conscription will come in, we'll get a 3/3 zombie army. Every time we brainstorm, we're going to get an additional 3 counters on that army, and it becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. And if it dies, as long as Mindless Conscription is still in play, we're going to be able to make another one. It starts at 3/3 again. Demon Inferior, of course, we've seen benefits from us drawing cards each turn because it's discounted by that amount. Homunculus Horde is 3 and a blue for a 2/2 Homunculus from Foundations that says whenever we draw our second card each turn, create a token that's a copy of this creature. That's important because the copy has this same ability. So let's say Homunculus Horde comes in and then we brainstorm with H&K. We'll make a second Homunculus Horde. Then the next turn we brainstorm again with another H&K copy. Both Homunculus Hordes will each make another Homunculus Horde. and so forth and so on. Every turn we draw 2 cards in that turn. So we have an exponentially growing number of 2/2 little homunculi. We've seen Psychosis Crawler, how it drains each opponent for 1 each time we draw a card, and Teferi and the spirit creature tokens that Teferi makes with his -2 ability, both of them get an extra counter, loyalty or +1/+1 respectively, whenever we draw a card. So those are our payoffs for all the draw we're doing. Next is our recursion section. These are ways to bring things back. Starting with Reenact the Crime. This is a 4-mana instant for 1 and triple blue that says exile target non-land card in a graveyard that was put there from anywhere this turn. Copy it, and you may cast the copy without paying its mana cost. So the only real restriction on this is that it has to be a non-land, and the card has to have gone to our graveyard this turn. So usually, the best way to get this to happen is to cast a clone, or a copy spell, copy H and K, resolve the brainstorm and the revealing and the casting for free, and then reenact whatever we just cast for free. Get to copy it again. That thing that we're copying does not get exiled, or it does get exiled, I should say, but Reenact the Crime does not, so if we have a way to get it back, we can sure do that all again. But this lets us sort of double dip on our big spells that we're casting by casting them again for just 4 mana. Live or Die, as we've seen, can return a creature from our graveyard to the battlefield. That's recursive. Grave Count Endeavor does the same thing, bringing something back. Necromantic Selection kills everything, but then brings something back. And then finally, Mnemonic Deluge. I normally don't put the borderless cards in here, but Mana Box was not giving me a price on the Commander Legends printing with the regular card frame, so I had to choose this one. Go with whichever one you want from wherever you're getting your cards. Mnemonic Deluge is 6 and triple blue for a sorcery, so really nice to hit with our Commander's Death Trigger. That says exile target instant or sorcery from a graveyard. Doesn't have to be ours, it usually will be, but it can sure be some from someone else's. Copy that card 3 times. You may cast the copies without paying their mana costs, and then exile Mnemonic Deluge. This is crazy. Imagine hitting Aminatu's Augury on this. Imagine having this on top of our library when one of our H&Ks dies. We drain someone for 9, then Aminatu's Augury in our graveyard, we exile it from the graveyard, copy it 3 times, put 3 lands into play probably. We can cast each type of spell, from each of those sets of 8. 1 from each of those sets of 8, so maybe 3 sorceries, 3 instants, just go off. And being able to do all this for free, since we put Mnemonic Deluge on top of our library and had an H&K die, that's just so much good value. So that is our recursion section. Let's take a look at the tokens we can make. Because we are a little low on creatures in this deck, so we want to be able to fill out our board and have good blockers or maybe even attackers. We have seen all of these cards. Emrakul's Messenger, of course, makes Eldrazi spawn. Ominous Seas can make the 8/8 Kraken tokens. Bastion of Remembrance makes 1/1 White Human Soldier creature token. Chasm Skulker, when it dies, makes a whole bunch of 1/1 blue squid with Island Walk. Detective of the Month makes some Azorius 2/2 detectives. Mindless Conscription gives us a zombie army that keeps growing. Homunculus Horde makes copies of itself, and of course Teferi can make his blue spirit creature tokens that are also 2/2s. Finally, we have a section of protection, which we've seen both of these already, but it's worth looking at. Sublime Epiphany can protect us because it can counter spells and activated or triggered abilities. That's a good way to keep us from being hit with something that isn't just something we would consider removal. Being able to counter abilities is really powerful. And Supplant Form, of course, can bounce a creature to its owner's hand, and we get to put a token copy of that into play, which can be a blocker. So both of these can protect us in their own ways beyond just being removal spells. And that covers all of our spells in our deck. As usual, we're going to take a look at our land base briefly. We are running 22 basic lands. We're mostly blue in this deck, but even though the proportions would generally want us to play more islands than swamps than I have here, I hate not being able to cast my commander. And even though our commander requires 2 blue pips and only 1 black one, I wanted to weight ourselves a little bit more toward black than we needed to, just to ensure that it's there's no chance by turn 5 we can't cast our commander because we're missing out on one of our colors. We are running Dimir Aqueduct. It is a bounce land. Bounce lands produce 2 mana when they are tapped, with a blue and a black, but they come in tapped, and when they come in, we have to bounce a land to our hand. Or to its owner's hand, I should say, but it's going to be our hand. This is great. It makes sure that not only are we not behind on our mana production, because even though something's going back to our hand, the Aqueduct itself produces 2 mana, but it means that we now have a land in our hand that next turn we can play, so we're still hitting our land drops. I really like the bounce lands in Commander. We are running Drowned Catacomb, which is a check land. It is a dual land that comes in tapped unless we control an island or a swamp. 22 of the cards in our deck are islands and or swamps, so we've got a nice check land and a pretty good chance of it coming in as an untapped dual. If you wanted to upgrade this, you could run Shipwreck Marsh, which is the slow land version. It comes in tapped only if it is the first or second land that we have on the battlefield. So that is probably a little bit more consistent in terms of coming in untapped, but in this deck, they're pretty similar, and Drowned Catacomb is much cheaper. Darkwater Catacombs is a filter land. It is the same thing as our Dimir Signet, except on a land. It taps for 2 mana, but you need to put 1 mana into it to tap it, so it just filters 1 into 2 for both of our colors. Good way to ensure that we have all our colors every time we need them. Oh, if we wanted to upgrade this, by the way, a good example would be the Shockland Watery Grave, which comes in tapped unless we want to pay 2 life, and then it comes in untapped, and it doesn't require us to filter something through it. Just a good option for us there. Next, we have our fixing lands. So Command Tower, of course we're running it, because we have a deck that's got at least 2 colors in it. It's an untapped land that taps for 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity, so in a way it's a land Arcane Signet. But just an untapped unconditional duel is pretty great. Path of Ancestry, equally great, because it is a tapped unconditional duel. So it's just a tap land, but there's a benefit to it. It makes blue or black for us, and when we use that mana to cast a creature spell that shares a type with our commander, we scry 1. The reason that's important is because our commander shares a color or a series of creature types with itself. So when we use this to cast Hidetsugu and Kairi, we're going to be able to get a free scry, and scrying is so good in this deck because we care about what's on top of our library all the time. This won't trigger, of course, if we're making a copy of our commander, because the spell that's doing that is not itself a creature spell that shares a creature type with our commander. But having 1 or 2 cards in this deck that are, having 1 or 2 lands that are tapped duels is not a bad thing, especially when we're getting a little bit of a benefit from it in the form of the scry. We are running Temple of the False God. I know some people don't like this land. I think it's great, especially for the power level of decks that I build. It is a land that taps for 2 colorless mana, so it's a soul land, like a Soul Ring, except that you need to have at least 4 lands in play besides it in order to tap it at all. Which means, unlike Soul Ring, you're not going to be able to ramp with this early in the game, but when you have the ability to tap it, it is ramped, because it's 1 land producing 2 mana that didn't require you to return the other lands to your hand. I think worth playing. We have 2 soft fetches in this deck. One of them is Shire Terrace. Shire Terrace is Evolving Wilds, kind of, but it comes in untapped and taps for colorless, or we can pay 1, tap and sack it to Rampant Growth, to search our library for a basic, put it on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle. So this is an untapped source for colorless mana, and then we have to pay into it in order to find colored mana, which itself would come in tapped. So using it as a soft fetch is a little slower than the kind of thing you might want to run in this, like an Evolving Wilds, or a Terramorphic Expanse, or a Vibrant Cityscape from the Spider-Man set. All of these are the same card, except that other than Shire Terrace, you don't have to pay to crack them, but they also don't tap for mana. The reason I'm running this will become apparent in a moment, in a later section of the land base, but you could, if you wanted to side grade into those, you could definitely run one of those Evolving Wilds variants, or even upgrade into a Fabled Passage, which is just a better Evolving Wilds. Or if you wanted to have a little less control over when you're sacrificing these, you could run Obscura Storefront or Maestro's Theater, the new Capenna sack lands that also do the Evolving Wilds thing, but gain you a life. The reason you might care about sacrificing this in order to search for something is what I mentioned at the top of the video. It's a fetch land. So if you're brainstorming and you know that what's in your hand is, maybe they're good cards, but the only things you can put on the top of your library are not what you want to draw over the next couple of turns, well, then you could always sacrifice Shire Terrace, search for a basic, and you get a shuffle. So you don't know what's on top of your library now, but it's probably better than what was on top of it after your brainstorm, because otherwise you wouldn't have cracked it then. So being able to hold this up, or to do the same thing with like a Fabled Passage or an Evolving Wilds, and crack it when you need to shuffle away what's on top of your library from the brainstorm, pretty good. You could, of course, upgrade this to an actual factual fetch land too. But I think it's pretty great that it is able to at least tap for colorless, for reasons we'll see in a moment. But before we do, we've got Myriad Landscape as well. Myriad Landscape comes in tapped, and taps for colorless, also good. But if we pay 2, tap, and sack it, we can search our library for 2 basic lands that share a land type, which means 2 islands or 2 swamps in this deck. Then we put them on the battlefield tapped and shuffle. So while this is slow, because it comes in tapped, and then we have to pay 2, tap, and sack it to put lands into play tapped, it is only taking up one of our land drops, and eventually putting 2 basics into play. So it's very slow ramp, but it is ramp. Next, we have a few other duels. Underground River is a pain land. It's the same thing as our Talisman of Dominance. It comes in, except it's a land. Comes in untapped, taps for colorless, or we can pay, we can take a damage from it to tap it for blue or black. Pretty good untapped fixing. We have a Pathway, because I love the pathways. Clearwater Pathway is a land that comes in untapped and just taps for blue. Or we could play it on its backside, Murkwater Pathway. It comes in untapped and taps for black. We get to choose when we're playing it which side is going to be face up. And what's nice about these pathways in a deck that's running a bounce land is that, say, maybe early on, we really need black, so we play it as a Murkwater Pathway. Then we later play the Dimir Aqueduct and bounce the Murkwater Pathway. Well, now it's back in our hand, and when we play it again, maybe we need more blue. We get to play it as the Clearwater Pathway, so it helps us both times. We are running Temple of Deceit. It is a scry land. Comes in tapped and taps for blue or black, but when it comes in, we scry 1. So this is a guaranteed scry for a tap land that taps for our colors, as opposed to Path of Ancestry, which is a tap land that taps for our colors that gives us a scry every time we use it to cast our commander. So we might get more scries over the course of the game out of Path of Ancestry, but we're guaranteed 1 scry out of our Temple of Deceit. And scrying, again, very good in a deck that cares about brainstorm effects. Finally, we have 5 utility lands. We're running Demolition Field because even though we don't do any mass land disruption, we want to be able to have a little bit of targeted land disruption just in case someone's running something dangerous for us, like a Rogue's Passage in their Voltron deck, or a Maze of Ith, something along those lines that stops us from attacking. Demolition Field comes in untapped and taps for colorless, or we can pay 2, tap, and sack it to destroy a non-basic land that an opponent controls. They then get to search for a basic and put it on the battlefield untapped and shuffle. And so do we. So neither of us are down a land, and the lands we have come in untapped. Unless, of course, one of us doesn't have a basic left in their library, we're both going to end up with a land card that we can use for mana that isn't as dangerous as whatever non-basic we got rid of. Next, we have Detection Tower, because Hidetsugu and Kairi's death trigger that drains our opponent targets our opponent, and so many of our other things target. We want to have a way around hexproof. So Detection Tower is a land that comes in untapped and taps for colorless, or we can pay 1 and tap it, and it says, until end of turn, your opponents and creatures your opponents control with hexproof can be the targets of spells and abilities you control as though they didn't have hexproof. So this gets around hexproof for us. Pretty great for people who are running like Leyline of Sanctity, that kind of thing. Is it Sanctity? Whichever one of the ley lines it is that gives you hexproof. We are also running Mirror Pool. Mirror Pool is the reason we're running Shire Terrace and a couple of these other lands that produce colorless mana. So it comes in tapped, and it taps for colorless itself, but we can pay 2 and a colorless. So this is 3 mana, one of which has to be colorless. It's not just generic mana like the 2. And then we tap it and sacrifice it, and we copy target instant or sorcery spell we control, and we can choose new targets for the copy. So for an extra 4 mana, essentially, in the form of tapping the Mirror Pool, 2 others, and something that produces colorless, like maybe our Soul Ring, we can copy Aminatu's Augury, or Supplant Form, or any one of our instants and sorceries that's doing so much good for us. Or, even without an instant or sorcery, we can pay 4 and a colorless, and tap and sacrifice Mirror Pool to make a token that's a copy of a creature we control. This is in our land base, and as long as we've got colorless available to us and enough mana to do so, we can start our copy chain with Hidetsugu and Kairi simply by sacrificing Mirror Pool. So very nice in this deck, but that's why I'm running a soft fetch that produces colorless mana, even though it costs a little bit for us to crack it and find a basic. So I didn't want to guard our colorless sources too heavily, but we have a few of them in this deck just in case we have a chance to use Mirror Pool. We are running Reliquary Tower for the same reason that we're running this is what happens when you're old. Our Mana Rock that taps for colorless and gives us no maximum hand size. That's what Reliquary Tower does, just that on a land. And then finally we have Rivendell. Rivendell is a legendary land that enters tapped unless we control a legendary creature. So if we've got our commander in play, pretty good. It comes in untapped and taps for blue. We can also pay 1 and a blue and tap it to scry 2, only if we control a legendary creature. This is a little bit more efficient than Castle Vantress, but you could certainly side grade into Castle Vantress if you want. It costs more to activate to get that scry, but it doesn't require the legendary creatures for entry or for activation. So just some thoughts on that. And that about sums it up. Again, I'm making a deck for each of the March of the Machine legends, so let me know in the comments if there's a legend you'd like to see me build or a style you'd like to see me build it in. Thanks for watching, everyone. Make sure to like and subscribe, and remember, magic is fun. You should play more Magic.